Never got in a car. Null and void. I got treated differently.
How did you get treated differently?
I've always gotten treated differently. Let's not open up that can of worms.
For years, Lexie McCollum stayed silent. She watched from a distance as her stepmother, Nell Fletcher, lived a life that seemed flawless on the outside. From the glamorous events to the picture-perfect family moments, it appeared as if Nell had the perfect life. But Lexie knew the truth, and now, she is finally ready to tell her side of the story. The problems between Lexie and Nell did not start overnight. It was not just one argument or misunderstanding. This was a history filled with deep wounds, broken trust, and years of feeling unheard. It all started when Lexie was much younger, trying to adjust to her father, Chris Fletcher, being with Nell. At first, she had hoped that they could become a real family, that she could have a stepmother who truly cared for her. But things did not turn out that way. Instead, Lexie felt pushed aside. She remembers moments when she tried to reach out to Nell, only to be ignored or dismissed. She remembers the family gatherings where she felt like an outsider, watching as Nell built a perfect image while keeping certain people, like her stepchildren, at a distance. But what hurt the most was when she and her siblings were completely cut off. "I have gone years without talking to you guys," Lexie revealed. "Because I got treated like I was a choice when we reached out to you, and you blocked all of us because of how you treated me." The situation was deeper than just a few disagreements. There was real pain behind Lex's words. She and her siblings had tried to mend things, but every attempt ended the same way, Nell shutting them out. They once believed they knew the full story about Nell Fletcher, but now they are realizing there is much more hidden beneath the surface. Lex's pain goes beyond being ignored. It is about betrayal. It is about feeling like she and her siblings were erased from their father's life. While Chris Fletcher remained in their lives to some extent, it was always different after Nell entered the picture. The distance grew. The tension increased. And eventually, it reached a breaking point where the communication completely stopped. Now, as Nell enjoys the spotlight on love and marriage, Hunt
I locked up. Then you didn't even pay me for that. Then you tell me you want your damn dogs back. You don't deserve that dog
Why
back.
didn't pay back? Cause I feel like that's a trade for a trade. If you gonna keep the dogs, why would I pay you back?
Lexie wonders if people truly know who she is. On screen, Nell appears as a devoted wife and mother. She shares advice on love and relationships. But off-screen, Lexie and her siblings have a different story to tell. One of the most revealing moments happened during a family dinner that no one can forget. At first, it seemed like any other gathering. The kind where everyone puts on a polite smile and tries to get along. But beneath the surface, emotions were boiling. The tension between Nell and Chris Fletcher's children was impossible to ignore. If you watched closely, you would have seen it. The uncomfortable glances, the forced small talk, the way certain topics were quickly avoided. It was clear there were unspoken words hanging in the air. Then, something shifted. The polite conversation broke down. Old wounds resurfaced. One of the children spoke up, expressing frustration over how they had been treated. And instead of trying to mend the situation, Nell shut it down. She dismissed their feelings, acting as if they were being dramatic. That moment changed everything. It was no longer just a feeling that something was off, it was confirmation that the issues in this family ran deep. And it was not just about misunderstandings, it was about a pattern of behavior that left people feeling excluded and unimportant. Lexie is now speaking out because she refuses to let this version of the story be the only one people hear. She wants people to know what really happened behind closed doors. She wants them to know about the nights she cried, wondering why her stepmother treated her this way. About the times she tried to fix things, only to be ignored. About the heartbreak of feeling like she lost her father to a new life that did not include her. For Lexie, this is not about seeking attention. It is about seeking the truth. She wants people to understand that while reality TV shows can present a polished version of someone's life, they do not always show the full reality. And in this case, the reality is that the relationship between Nell Fletcher and her stepchildren has been far from perfect. So, what happens next? Will Nell respond to Lex's claim?
I belong to y'all. I'll be wealthy. If it was left up to your daddy, y'all wouldn't have. I kind of have mixed feelings of why I'm the bad guy.
Will Chris Fletcher step in and address the pain his children have been feeling? Or will this remain another painful chapter in a family that has struggled to find peace? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear, Lexie McCollum is done staying silent. And now, the truth is finally coming out. Lexie, Chris's daughter from a past relationship, was not just upset. She was holding on to years of pain. The way she looked at Nell, the way she hesitated to speak, it all showed a deeper story, one that had been building for a long time. Lexie's voice, her tense body, and the way she looked at Nell said so much. And if you noticed the side glances from the rest of the family, you could tell they knew this was about more than just dinner. Lexie tried to be respectful, but her feelings were too strong to hide. When she said she did not feel included, you could see Nell's face change. She quickly brushed it off, but the hurt was already there. This was not just a small problem. It was deep pain that had been there for many years. What really caused this problem? Was it just a blended family struggling to get along, or was there something much bigger happening? Lexie says that dinner was only a small piece of a much deeper issue. She is finally speaking up, and what she is sharing is more than anyone ever expected. Life in the Fletcher household was not as perfect as it looked on Love and Marriage, Huntsville. Lexie McCollum says her childhood started out fine. She had a close bond with her dad, Chris, and at first, Nell seemed warm and welcoming. But everything changed when she turned 10. That was when she began to notice a big change in Nell's behavior toward her. At first, it was small. She was not as warm, not as kind, but over time, it became clear that something was different. Lexie started to notice subtle shifts in how she was treated. She was not included in as many conversations, there were fewer invitations to family outings, and an uncomfortable silence replaced what once felt like a close-knit bond. She began to feel like an outsider in her own home. What made it even worse was that nobody seemed to notice or care how much things had changed. Chris was busy with work, and Nell had already cemented her role in their household. Lexie felt like she was fading into the background, and the warmth she once felt from her stepmother was disappearing. At first, Lexie tried to ignore it, convincing herself that she was imagining things. But the truth was undeniable. Nell's patience with her started to fade. Her voice became sharper, her tone colder, and the affection that had once been present in their relationship seemed to have vanished. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and suddenly, Lexie no longer felt like part of the family. Instead, she felt like an unwelcome guest, someone tolerated rather than loved. Then came the arguments. Small disagreements turned into full-blown fights. One moment that still haunts Lexie to this day was when she overheard Nell yelling, "Why should I pay it back? Shut the hell up. My God, do you really think that is fair?" The words, the anger in Nell.
She has a very distorted memory with telling the truth, or she's actually doing this to agitate me and at my wit's ends with it.
Nell's voice, and the way Chris barely responded told Lexie that something much bigger was happening behind closed doors. She started paying closer attention to the tension in the household, and that was when she realized that Nell's change in behavior was not random. It had a cause. Something had happened between her father and Nell, something that had shifted the entire dynamic of their family. Lexie has not shared all the details yet, but she has hinted that her father's actions had a big part in the tension between them. Did Chris and Nell argue about parenting? Did Chris fail to set clear rules between his new wife and his children from his past relationship? No matter what the reason was, Lexie is sure that her dad and Nell had their own problems behind closed doors, and she was caught in the middle. One of the biggest questions that haunts Lexie is whether Nell changed because of Chris or if she had always been this way. Was she just pretending in the beginning? Was her kindness just a mask? Lexie remembers how different things used to be. She remembers baking cookies with Nell in the kitchen, getting tucked in at night, and feeling like she had gained a second mother. But as the years went by, those moments became rare until they disappeared entirely. The most painful part was that it felt intentional. Lexie says there were times when it seemed like Nell was actively trying to push her away, making it clear that she was not her child. At first, it was small things, excluding her from shopping trips, forgetting her birthday, not showing up to school events. But then, it became more direct. Harsh words, dismissive attitudes, and outright ignoring her. She felt invisible, like a burden rather than a daughter. Chris, on the other hand, remained silent. Whether he was unaware or simply refused to acknowledge the problem, he did nothing to fix it. Lexie often wondered if he noticed the way Nell treated her, if he saw the way she was hurting. She wanted to believe that her father cared, that he would step in if he knew what was really going on. But the sad truth was, he never did. Maybe he was too afraid to upset Nell, or maybe he believed that ignoring the problem would make it go away. The final breaking point came when Lexie was a teenager. One night, after another tense argument, Nell looked her straight in the eye and said, "You are not my responsibility." The words cut deeper than anything else. It was in that moment that Lexie realized that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be accepted. No matter how much she wanted a mother-daughter relationship, Nell was never going to give it to her. After that, Lexie stopped trying. She stopped asking for attention, stopped hoping for affection. She focused on school, on her own dreams, and on a future where she did not have to live under the same roof as Nell. And eventually, she got that chance. Now, as an adult, Lexie is speaking out because she refuses to let the world believe in a picture-perfect version of her childhood that never existed. She sees Nell on television, portraying the role of a loving wife and mother, and it makes her sick. Because the truth is, behind the cameras, behind the scripted moments, there was a much darker reality. So, what happens next? Will Nell respond to Lex's claims? Will Chris finally acknowledge the pain his daughter went through? Or will this all be brushed under the rug, just like everything else? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Lexie McCollum is done staying silent. And now, the truth is finally coming out. This goes beyond typical step-parent struggles. This was
I need to go live, and I need to let all my supporters know that that's not true.
the deep emotional divide that shaped her entire childhood. Disappeared from her life one day. He was a present and involved father, then suddenly he was just gone. As a child, she didn't understand what was happening. She remembers calling his phone over and over hoping to hear his voice, but every time she was met with excuses, and the person always giving her those excuses Nell. Lexie recalls how Nell would tell her that Chris wasn't around or was busy. At first she believed it, but after a while the pattern became clear. He wasn't just busy, he was choosing to stay away, and what made things worse was the fact that no one was being honest with her years. Later, Lexie finally found out the truth was even more painful. Chris had not just walked away. He had allegedly left Nell for another woman and started a new family. That is right, he had a whole other life that Lexie knew nothing about. The worst part? While Lexie sat at home wondering why her father did not call, he was busy building a new life with someone else. This shocking truth made Lexie question everything. Was Nell trying to protect her? Or was she hiding her own pain? And more importantly, could this be the real reason Nell changed toward her? Did Nell start treating Lexie differently because she was already hurting from losing her husband to another woman? Was she taking out her pain on her stepdaughter without even realizing it? Think about it. Every time she looked at Lexie, did she see a reminder of Chris and everything he had done to her? And instead of keeping her feelings separate, did she let her sadness and anger affect their relationship? If that is true, it would explain why things became so cold so fast. But as Lexie later shared, the tension did not end there. She also revealed something even more shocking. Nell was actually the one paying Chris's child support. Now let that sink in for a moment. After everything he put her through, Nell was still financially responsible for his other obligations, and from the way Lexie tells it, she didn't do it happily. Every time Lexie asked for something, a new pair of shoes, money for school activities, anything, Nell allegedly shut her down. Her response was always the same: ask your mother. It didn't matter that she lived in the same household or that Nell had once been a parental figure to her. To Nell, Lexie was not her responsibility. Now, imagine being a child in that situation. You already feel abandoned by your father, and then the woman who once cared for you starts treating you like an outsider. You go from feeling like part of the family to feeling like a burden. And the hardest part? You do not even know why it is happening. It is no surprise that Lexie started to feel angry toward Nell. From her point of view, she was being blamed for something that was not her fault. And the more she tried to speak up, the more Nell pulled away. But Lexie was not done telling her story. Isn't done sharing her truth, and the next part of her story only makes things even messier. Some believe Nell was in a situation where she had no good choices. She was hurt and struggling to move forward. Humiliated and still expected to be the bigger person. Others argue that no matter what, a child should never feel like a burden. After all, Lexie had no control over Chris's mistake. She was just a kid who wanted to be loved. At the end of the day, Nell had a choice. She could have separated her anger toward Chris from her role as a stepmother, but she didn't, and for Lexie that's something she'll never forget. But I feel like, you know what, I need to go live, and I need to let all my supporters know that is not true. Miss Nell does not live like that. She is not playing the side chick for anybody. Okay? That is just not how it goes. Some people have tried to link Lex's story to Tisha K's interview with Martell, but Lexie made it clear that is not the case. No, I am not talking about that interview, she said. For those who know, I will not say any names right now. Just stay tuned. Now that Lexie is speaking out, the internet is filled with reactions. And as expected, opinions are mixed. Some people feel sorry for Nell, saying she was put in a tough situation. Some people believe Nell was just another woman who was hurt by Chris's actions. They think she did the best she could in a hard situation and may have felt that taking care of Lexie was a responsibility she never asked for. To them, Chris is the real problem. He is the one who caused all this pain, yet he faced the least consequences, but others fully support Lexie. They say that no matter what happened between Chris and Nell, Lexie was just a child. She should never have been caught in the middle of their problems. They point out that Nell wasn't the only one who had to deal with Chris's betrayal. Lexie did too, and while Nell had a choice in staying with Chris, Lexie had no choice but to live in a home where she felt unwanted. Some fans are even calling out both Nell and Chris, saying they both failed Lexie in different ways. Chris abandoned her emotionally and Nell made her feel like an outsider. So what's the truth? Well, Lexie isn't done yet. She's promised even more revelations to come, and if what she's shared so far is any indication, things are only going to get more complicated. This is just the beginning of Lex's story. She is getting ready to share even more details in a YouTube series, where she will talk about what really happened behind closed doors. She has already said there is much more to tell, and from the way things are going, it is clear she is not staying quiet anymore. The biggest question now is, will she reveal more secrets about Nell and Chris's marriage? So far, she has only shared a small part of what she says she knows. If Lexie decides to share everything, the fallout could be huge. And let us not forget, Nell has not responded to any of these claims yet. But how long can she stay silent? If Lexie keeps revealing more, Nell may have no choice but to speak up and defend herself. And if that happens, this family drama could take a whole new turn. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments.